There comes a quiet moment when you realize you're the one still holding the relationship. You're the one who reaches out, who remembers, who keeps the thread from breaking. And you do it gently, without complaint, without asking for recognition. But inside, something feels uneven. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. Relationships become heavy when effort quietly goes one way. You don't say anything about it. You don't want to make things awkward. You tell yourself this is just how relationships change. But there are moments when you wonder how long you can keep holding on without feeling held back. If you've ever felt alone while still staying connected, this isn't about neediness. And it isn't about blame. It's about the quiet exhaustion that comes from caring a little more than the other side seems to notice. And this conversation is for that tired place in your heart. Being the one who keeps reaching. You're the one who keeps reaching. You check in. You remember dates. You ask how they've been. Not because you're afraid to be alone, but because you care. Caring becomes exhausting when you're the only one who keeps showing up. At first, it felt natural. Relationships ebb and flow. Someone has to initiate sometimes. So you did. You told yourself this was just a season, that things would balance out. But over time, the pattern stayed. You were always the first message, the one who followed up, the one who kept the connection alive. And slowly, that effort stopped feeling mutual. You didn't ask for appreciation. You didn't need praise. You just wanted to feel that the relationship existed without you holding it together. So you kept reaching, a little more carefully now, a little more quietly. You didn't want to pressure anyone. You didn't want to seem needy. But inside, there's a growing tiredness. Not from the relationship itself, but from being the only one who keeps extending the bridge. If you've ever felt that fatigue, it doesn't mean you cared too much. It means the weight has been uneven for a while, and your heart is starting to notice how heavy that can feel when carried alone. When effort becomes invisible, at some point, you notice something shift. Your effort doesn't disappear. It just stops being seen. You still reach out, still listen carefully, still make room, but it feels like it lands without leaving much of an impression. Effort hurts most when it's no longer noticed. You begin to wonder if anyone realizes how much you're giving. Not in a dramatic way, not with resentment, just a quiet curiosity. Would they notice if you stopped? Would the silence feel different? Or would it simply continue? You don't test it right away. You tell yourself, this isn't a scorecard. That keeping track would cheapen the connection. So you keep showing up without making it obvious. But when effort goes unseen for too long, it starts to feel heavier. Not because you want credit, but because effort is a form of presence. And presence wants to be met. You begin to feel like your care has become background noise. Always there, rarely acknowledged. That invisibility can be painful. Because you're not asking for grand gestures. You're simply hoping your effort still matters to someone else. If you've ever felt that quiet sting, it doesn't mean the relationship failed. It means your heart has been offering something meaningful and is starting to notice how little of it comes back. That awareness is often the first sign that something needs to change. Not in anger, but in honesty. The fear of letting go. The hardest part isn't realizing the effort is uneven. It's wondering what happens if you stop holding on. You don't just fear losing the relationship. You fear confirming that you were the only one still holding it. Letting go is frightening when you suspect nothing will reach back. So you hesitate. You pull back slightly, then step forward again. You don't want to test anyone. You don't want to create distance, because distance already exists, and you've been trying to bridge it. You ask yourself if this is just your imagination, if you're being too sensitive. You tell yourself, everyone gets busy. That care doesn't always look the same. And maybe that's true. But the fear remains. If you stop reaching, will the connection fade completely? That question can keep you stuck. Not because you're weak, but because you're loyal. You remember how things used to feel. You remember when effort was shared. And letting go feels like letting go of that memory too. If you've been holding on out of fear, it doesn't mean you don't respect yourself. It means part of you is still hoping the connection might find its way back without you having to force it. That hope isn't foolish, it's human, but carrying it alone can quietly wear you down. Why you don't say anything? You've thought about saying something, not a confrontation, not an accusation, just an honest sentence about how it feels. But each time, you stop yourself. Silence often isn't fear, it's consideration. You don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. You don't want to sound demanding. You don't want to turn care into conflict. So you stay quiet. You tell yourself that naming the imbalance might make things worse, that it's kinder to carry it alone. And maybe for a while it was. You've learned how to be understanding, how to give others space, how to wait. But silence has a cost. When you don't speak about what you feel, others assume there's nothing to hear. They assume you're fine. They assume the connection feels the same to you, and you don't correct them. Not because you don't matter, but because you've grown used to protecting the relationship even when it's tiring. If you've stayed quiet to keep peace, it doesn't mean you lacked courage. It means you valued connection. But when silence becomes the only option, your needs begin to disappear from the relationship. And that disappearance can feel lonelier than any difficult conversation. Because you're not asking to be understood perfectly. You're asking to be met somewhere closer to where you are now. And that request has been waiting quietly inside you for a long time. Emotional imbalance over time. Emotional imbalance doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds quietly, moment by moment. You give a little more. You wait a little longer. You adjust again. Imbalance becomes painful when it lasts long enough to feel normal. At first, you barely notice it. You tell yourself, this is just how relationships shift. That one person often carries more for a while. So you compensate. You lower expectations. You soften disappointment. You keep things light. But over time, that adjustment becomes a pattern. You're the one who remembers details, who checks in emotionally, who senses distance, and bridges it. And the other side doesn't pull away deliberately. They simply settle into the space you keep filling. That's when imbalance deepens. Not because anyone is cruel, but because effort flows where it's already being provided. You begin to feel it in your body. A heaviness before reaching out. A pause before sending the message. A quiet question. Do I still want to do this? That question isn't bitterness. It's awareness. Because when imbalance lasts too long, it slowly erodes something essential. The feeling of being equally chosen. If you've felt that erosion, it doesn't mean you stayed too long. It means you cared enough to keep giving until your heart finally asked for something more balanced. That asking is not a demand. It's a signal that you're ready for connection that doesn't require you to carry it alone anymore. What mutual care actually feels like now. Mutual care doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't require constant effort or long explanations. It feels steady. Mutual care feels lighter because you're not carrying it alone. When care is shared, you don't have to remind someone that you exist. You don't have to initiate every moment or wonder if you're asking for too much. Care shows up without being prompted. A message that comes without you reaching first. A question that goes deeper than polite habit. A pause that makes space for how you're really doing. Mutual care doesn't keep score. It simply feels balanced. You give, and something meets you there. Not perfectly, not all the time, but often enough that your nervous system can rest. You don't feel like you're chasing connection. You don't feel like you're holding something fragile that might fall apart if you loosen your grip. Instead, there's room to breathe. You can show up honestly without editing yourself down. You can step back for a moment and trust that the relationship won't disappear. If it's been a while since care felt this way, that doesn't mean your expectations are unrealistic. It means your heart remembers what shared effort feels like. And that memory isn't a complaint. It's a guide. a quiet reminder that connection can still be reciprocal, and that you're allowed to want relationships where care meets you halfway. Letting go without bitterness. Letting go doesn't always look like leaving. Sometimes it looks like loosening your grip. You can let go of effort without letting go of dignity. You stop reaching first, not to punish, not to prove a point, but to listen. You listen to what happens when you step back. You notice how it feels to no longer carry the weight alone. At first, it can feel uncomfortable. You're used to holding things together, used to being the steady one. So loosening your grip can feel like failure. But it isn't. It's honesty. You're no longer forcing balance where it doesn't exist. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. Letting go without bitterness means you don't rewrite the past. You don't deny what was shared. You don't pretend the care wasn't real. You simply stop sacrificing yourself to keep something alive that can't meet you anymore. That choice isn't dramatic. It's quiet, respectful, grounded. If you've been afraid that letting go would make you smaller, please know this. You don't lose yourself by stepping back. You reclaim yourself, and that reclamation creates space, not just for peace, but for connections that don't require you to disappear in order to stay. You don't have to carry it alone. If you've been the one holding the relationship together for a long time, please hear this gently. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Connection should not feel like a quiet burden. You were never wrong for caring deeply, for remembering, for reaching out. Those things came from love, not weakness. But love was never meant to move in only one direction. You are allowed to notice when effort feels uneven. You are allowed to step back without guilt. You are allowed to want connection that meets you where you are now. Letting go of the weight doesn't erase what mattered. It simply honors what can no longer be sustained by one heart alone. If you choose to loosen your grip, do it kindly, toward yourself, not with bitterness, not with regret, just with clarity. And if tonight feels quiet after putting something down, let that quiet be a place of rest, not emptiness. You didn't lose something by stopping. You made space. Space for peace. Space for balance. Space for connections that don't require you to keep holding on alone. And that space is not the end of caring. It's the beginning of caring for yourself too.